Hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth of Global Educational Perspective webinars. My name is Ali Kushyar, and I have the pleasure of being co-host today. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mina Salagaju as Assistant Professor of STEM Education at Alpha University. Dr. Salagaju will be the host of this webinar. I will also extend the welcome to Dr. Tim Nichols, the Chair and Associate Professor of Education at Alpha University as well. We are so pleased to welcome Dr. Husa Al-Angari from Kingdom Saudi Arabia. Also, I would like to extend my welcome to all of our wonderful participants today. We hope that Dr. Al-Angari's presentations and our collaborative activities and discussions provide you with some insight into Kingdom Saudi Arabia's educational system, the opportunities and challenges and responses to the pandemic situation, and more. I will now pass over to Dr. Sadagachu to introduce Dr. Alangari's for us.
Thank you so much, Ali. So we are so pleased to host Dr. Alangary today in our fifth GEP webinar. Dr. Husa Alangary is a faculty member at the School of Education at Princess Noura University and an instructional design or e-learning consultant. She received her master's and PhD in instructional system technology from Indiana University in the United States. Her research focuses on instructional design, technology integration, teacher professional development, and e-learning. She has worked on various committees such as the e-learning committee at PNU and the International Program Committee at IU. She is a recipient of the American Educational Research Associations of 2021 Technology, Instructional Cognition and Learning, or TICL, and Special Interest Groups Outstanding International Research Collaboration Award. Many congratulations for this award to you and your peers, Dr. Al-Alngari. So Dr. Al-Alngari, it's a pleasure to host you today in this webinar. Before we go any further, I would like to just tell you a few more rules about this GEP webinar. GEP is recorded and will be shared publicly. So please leave your microphones on mute unless you're sharing. And please keep your videos also off unless you're sharing. We would also invite you to engage in respectful discourse and create a positive collegial atmosphere. For today, our agenda is we're gonna have a keynote presentation for 40 to 45 minutes, and then we're gonna have breakout room discussion for 15 to 20 minutes, following by question and answers. So I think I'm a little bit late because we started late, but we are in good shape. So Dr. Alangary, it's now over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mina, and for everyone else.
Share your own presentation if you wish to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll go ahead and begin sharing. There we go. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. It is my honor to attend and speak with all of you about our educational system in Saudi Arabia, especially with the current pandemic and all that has transpired since the beginning of this pandemic. So the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is located in the Middle East. The population is approximately 35 million people. It is a large area. It's 2 million square meters. I should have changed that to miles, but it's okay. The primary language is Arabic. English is also spoken here. It is a royal monarchy. We have a king, etc., but we also have our council of ministers and so forth. We use the Hijri calendar, which is the Islamic calendar. It's actually a lunar calendar, so it's about 10 days shorter than the Gregorian calendar. So yeah. So as for Saudi Arabia, the education has been around for centuries. It's nothing new. But formal education started around 1926. Before then, what we had what was referred to katatib, which was actually where they would have people get together and they would memorize the Quran. And sometimes they would teach them how to write and whatnot. It was not considered a formal type of schooling at the time. And of course, you know, Saudi Arabia was, you know, was declared Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. So hence all of these changes. So the Director of Education was established in 1926. It was then changed to the Ministry of Education in 1952. And it was merged with the Ministry of Higher Education in 2015. So it's currently only called the Ministry of Education. Now, as far as education is concerned, the Ministry of Education encompasses all of the K through 12 private schools and the universities here in Saudi Arabia. We are currently going through remote teaching for K through 12 and higher education due to the pandemic. We have currently portals called the Ain portal for teachers, students, and families. This is kind of like our kind of similar to, it has our learning management system and whatnot, and that's where everyone goes online to learn, with the exception of course, higher education. Higher education, we have, each university is different. For instance, Princess Noor University uses Blackboard for our online courses. We also have SHEMS, which is an open educational resource platform, and as well, the Ministry of Education works with the National E-Learning Center and the Saudi Electronic University. And we have more of a technology enhanced infrastructure currently. And kind of, we had to really quickly get online like everybody else around the world. So right here, you can tell, I'm just going to move the photo because it's blocking my view. This is the kind of the outline of the Ministry of Education. We have the Minister of Education who heads it, and he has his minister assistant, Deputy Minister, and then Deputy Minister for Universities for Research and Innovation. And then under that, we have different departments such as, or vice ministries. We have for the projects of maintenance, shared services, human resources, planning and development, public education, educational programs, etc. So they all go under, they're all under the Minister of Education. Just trying to, okay, it's not allowing me to change the slide. There we go. So in general, and I get to this because everybody's always really, really curious about women in Saudi Arabia and women's education. So currently there are 334,000 women working in the education sectors. There are about 1,300 women who are actually leaders in universities who hold leadership positions. There are 369,000 female employees, teachers in public education and also in private education. We have 4 female leaders that actually hold the positions of deputy minister, 33,000 faculty members in our university. And just right here, I would say that the last, I think it was like from a few years ago, last 10, 15 years at least, we have more women with higher education degrees and more women working in the education field than men. So that is kind of how, you know, how many we've got and whatnot. So the objectives of the Ministry of Education in general is to empower women within the Kingdom's 2030 vision. So the Kingdom's 2030 vision and our 5-year plans that we normally have every 5 years, of course, sorry, I lost the word that I was trying to say, but it could probably be because I was fasting all day. So within the Vision 2030, the Kingdom's 2030 vision, it is to empower women, which has been going at a very fast rate currently. It is within it, the care and development of early childhood education, the free and distinctive education, elimination of discrimination against women, increasing participation in all sectors, equal opportunities for both genders, and women assuming leadership positions. And I have observed this a lot in the past 1.5 years that I've been here, that there has been a huge push for empowering women within our educational system. So, okay, I do not know why this is covered here. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay, well, it's not allowing me to do anything here.
Can you use
all right, it's fine. I can't read the top of it because of
Zoom.
there we go. Okay. So the educational goals in the Ministry of Education are to promote family participation in preparing for their children's future, building an integrated educational journey, improving equal access to education for all, improving basic educational outcomes, improve the ranking of educational institutions, and providing qualitative knowledge for distinguished people in priority areas, and ensure compatibility between educational outcomes and labor market needs. So within our virtual schools, for instance, we have the National Educational Portal, which I mentioned today, and as we all know, as I mentioned, that we are all online currently. All the educational system currently is online, with exception of some faculty and certain employees that do go to work on a regular basis. We have a unified educational system for K through 12. Virtual schools are linked to the Sustainable Development Goals and capacity building, as is Vision 30 that I mentioned, 2030 that I mentioned earlier. So with the COVID-19 pandemic response, this is just one, the statistics for one day, a few days ago. All the airports and ports of entry were actually closed last March of 2020, and they still remain closed. Only necessary employees and people who would like to return to their countries are allowed to leave. Otherwise, nobody leaves, nobody enters, to keep a lid on the pandemic. Ministries and businesses immediately went remote in March. The return to work occurred slowly around the end of summer 2020. We had people either go to work 1 week on, 1 week off, where they would be online for 1 week and they would be physically present for a week, or they would just come in depending on their job. Some people needed to come in daily, some people not, but it was very slow at first. I think it was 50% and then increased to 75%. So with the pandemic response, what happened was, if you could see here, I don't know if this is very clear for you, the first confirmed case in our country was on March 2nd. And then on March 24th, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 as a global pandemic. What happened was we began closing as soon as we had the first cases, and actually a little bit before. The Umrah and Hajj, which is a religious practice to go to Mecca, if you've heard of it, was closed immediately, so that we had to prevent, people coming and going and the transfer of the pandemic. And then we continued on closing to schools and then closing international travels. And then we started with a nationwide curfew that was from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. And at one point, we actually had a 24-hour curfew to curb the cases that we had. We are still kind of going up and down. This was up until only April, so we have a lot more. It went down, went back up. We're still at approximately 900 cases per day in the country, but we're still in pandemic mode. Everybody has to wear masks. It's the law, etc. So when it came to the educational system in response to the pandemic, all schools, universities switched to remote teaching on March 8th, 2020. As I mentioned, the airports and all ports of entry were closed and continue to remain closed. Remote teaching and learning was considered temporary at first, because I'm like my friends who are in the US and other countries, we all didn't know how long this was going to last. Unfortunately, we are still teaching remotely, and actually this week our university students have started their exams, as well as K through 12 students. And all of the decisions were actually made as we go, as things went along, hey, we're going to be remote for the next 2 months to the end of the school year. And then right before this school year, the minister announced that, along with the Minister of Health, that we were going to actually continue online learning. And so it kind of went to approximately, the decisions were made for 2 weeks, up to 2 months, up to a whole semester. This year has been mostly online. The reassessment, like I mentioned, happens every few weeks or a couple of months maximum. So here is the distance education timeline. So on February 1st of last year, they were updating the emergency plans and intensifying awareness for everyone here in Saudi Arabia. On February 3rd, there was a royal decree regarding measures to combat the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 8th, of course, that was when the decisions, when all schools and all universities were closed, and we shifted to online learning actually within 24 hours. On March 9th, the Ministry of Education formed a high committee to track the shift. So when I was talking about having these decisions made as we go along, there was a committee already within the Ministry of Education working with the Ministry of Health to determine whether it was safe for students to return or not. It has not been safe for students to return, hence why we have been online this whole year. March 10th, providing accounting for the technological needs for the university infrastructure to support the shift to distance learning. So what happened was the universities and the Ministry of Education in general began to provide all the technological requirements to update the infrastructure for everyone through 12 higher education to make sure that everyone was able to have a smooth learning experience. On March 12th, the readiness and preparation plans were underway. And on March 15th, technical support of educational platforms was enhanced through a unified national license. And then on March 18th, the assessment guides were released. As for the statistics in the distance education system currently, we have had 60 million viewers for the AIN satellite TV lessons, and 600,000 international views for the lessons, 1.3 million discussion sessions, 2 million electronic content items, and so forth. So it concludes, YouTube subscribers, TV lessons, and so on and so forth. So in cooperation with Takaful Foundation, the Ministry of Education actually provided more than 20,000 tablets, laptops, and desktop computers for those who did not have access to make sure that they could go online and continue with their education. All right, so this is the time check. I think we're good on time.
Absolutely, you are. So if anyone have a question and they want to share with us on the chat box, or if in your class team there is any question, please feel free to stop us.
And please, if I'm speaking too fast, let me know. Sometimes I get a little too excited and I just don't stop. All right. So we also have, we have what was called the Saudi Open Educational Resources, SHEMS platform, where we have all types of courses, lessons, activities, videos, etc., for all educators here in the kingdom to use. We have also developed the online learning standards for education within technology, administration, equity. All of these standards are available online on the National E-Learning Center's website if anyone's interested in taking a look. And so here you could see where we have our standards and what was compulsory, what was advanced, etc. And I'm very happy that I was a part of this. It was very interesting. They did an amazing job. They actually did all of this within months, really quickly. Also, the National E-Learning Center worked with the Online Learning Consortium to develop some of these guides or reports on the state of online learning in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and how the COVID-19 pandemic changed education, the perspective from this side of the world, and the state of learning also for higher education. So the OECD Teaching and Learning International Survey, the TALIS for teachers, these were the results of the report. If you can see here that Saudi Arabia was one of the most prepared to teach online during this pandemic. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say 73%. I would say a little closer to, I don't know, maybe 65%. But this was actually a countrywide survey. as you can see, it was in some places we were a little bit above the OECD average, and others we were a little bit below. The school and student preparedness for ICT-based learning prior to the crisis was that schools in general were somewhat prepared. I am not sure if, I would like to speak to those who did this survey a little bit, take a little closer look at some of the numbers. But again, Saudi Arabia is within range most of the time or above preparedness. Instructional resources. So these are the different instructional resources that were actually used to support the academic experience. So if you can see that we had instructional packages, we had the textbooks or e-textbooks, worksheets, printouts, everything. And actually what happened was the ministry made sure that all students received their textbooks. I'm not sure if you know about this, but here the textbooks for the K through 12 educational system, they're all free. They're all handed out to the students and they get to keep them. We did not have radio education. We had educational television, of course. We had the online instructional resources. We had, of course, all teachers in K through 12 and higher education delivered their instruction online through their own learning management system. There was online instruction provided by private tutors, and other modalities were not available. So if we were to look at the education statistics, the higher education statistics, we had 2.6 million virtual classrooms, 1.4 million students that were online in higher education, 2.8 million instructional hours, 75,000 faculty members that conducted online learning or presented their courses online, 4.5 million e-tests, and 420,000 educational subjects. Now this is a few months old, so things might have changed a little bit. And one of the things I wanted to mention is actually in higher education, every week faculty is to report to their departments, and their departments to their colleges, and the colleges to their university, and then on to the Ministry of Education of how many conducted their courses online, what LMSs did they, because sometimes they'll use Blackboard, sometimes in our university, for instance, sometimes they will use Microsoft Teams, sometimes Zoom, it just depends. And all of this will be reported weekly to the Ministry of Education. So when it comes to the Ministry of Education and scientific research, there's a big push for scientific research. They have been providing the infrastructure for scientific research support. They have been managing research projects, attaining research cooperation between, the Ministry of Education and universities and so forth with international researchers and institutions. They have been participating in committees and related projects. So for instance, as soon as we went online, we had an e-learning committee immediately presented in our department. And they're also obtaining research grants as well. So when it comes to the research, universities' research initiatives, each university, or the ones here listed, at least these are examples that I've been able to find, had their own initiative. So for instance, Princess Noor University, we had a coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, that one's a little backwards. So research initiative, other universities followed and did the same as well. King Saud University had their own, King Abdulaziz University their own, and so on and so forth. So what happened were the three phases. Phase one was coping. There was sudden school closures, and there was in order to limit learning losses. So what the ministry wanted to do was to limit learning losses as much as possible. So the transition online within 24 hours to make sure that everything stayed. I'm going to be honest, it was a difficult period for everybody, whether it's educators, for the ministry, for parents, for students. And I've also spoken to my friends in the US who have the same issue. Everybody back in March and April really didn't know what was happening, or how long it was going to last. Phase two was to mitigation. It was to mitigate health costs and loss of workforce and jobs. I think that in general, honestly, Saudi Arabia did a very good job of limiting job loss. We were all able to work from home without pretty much losing our jobs or anything of the sort. And when it came to health costs, we were actually provided with free tests from the beginning. At the beginning, the first few months, they had rented out hotels and places where people who tested positive would actually go and stay there for their quarantine for 2 weeks. And of course, now, we just quarantine at home. And now the vaccine has been rolled out already. So I'm very thankful, especially those in the education, sector, they have priority for the vaccine. And then phase 3, the aftermath. What happens next? I think one of the things that we've learned throughout this is that, we didn't have as much online learning previously. And now that I think that what's going to occur is online learning is here to stay for sure. It probably in the future, it's going to be more blended learning than anything else. Hopefully, fingers crossed that COVID-19 goes away and we don't have to worry about this forever. So the challenges faced, like I mentioned, there was a quick transition. It was within 24 hours, but there was little to no time to really prepare. My friends at Indiana University were given 2 weeks. They had 1 week already spring break and they were given an extra week. So I think that would have been something that was that could have been changed at the time. But at the same time, I think how they handled it was very impressive from my point of view, because there was no time lost. I mean, they were working 24/7, with the Ministry of Health to make sure that our educational system wasn't disrupted during this time. So there was a digital divide when it came to teachers and students lacking computers or the computing literacy. That was when Takaful came in along with the Ministry of Education and provided those laptops for students. Teachers were automatically given teacher professional development workshops. And I just, when COVID-19 happened, it was a shock, I'm pretty sure, to everybody. And having something, we all thought it was just be like H1N1 or, any of the other lovely viruses. And I'm being very sarcastic when I say lovely. We didn't think this was going to happen, honestly. The readiness to adopt distance learning. There were a lot of faculty and teachers that were just not ready yet. But to be honest, I was so impressed with how faculty in our department, for instance, they just began immediately. They went ahead, they started, making sure their everything was uploaded and that they were using, if they had backup plans. So for instance, if Microsoft, Blackboard Collaborate was not working, they would use Microsoft Teams. And if Microsoft Teams was not working, I mean, you have so many people going online at the same time, and it's a lot. Another thing that I forgot to mention was actually when we switched online, when it came to K through 12, first through sixth grades were actually moved to the afternoon evening hours. So junior high and high school would start from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then elementary school was from 3 to 7 p.m. And this was to allow for mothers and parents who are actually working during the day, since younger students usually need more help. But it's quite stressful when you've got kids in all stages and they're from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., but it's all good. There were some setbacks when it came to LMS options, Blackboard, technical issues that happen anywhere. The swift action by the ministry to transition online left a lot of us parents unprepared. Now I'm speaking also from a parent's perspective and an education perspective, that we were unprepared. I mean, maybe because of, I actually am in instructional technology, so I kind of, understand what it's all about, but there are others that may not. And so it was quite a shock to our system. There's also system change anxiety. I mean, I think there was anxiety in general throughout the world within, whether it's their educational system, whether it was, with the pandemic, health-wise, et cetera. And as an unprecedented pandemic, well, I mean, I can't say unprecedented. I mean, in our lifetimes, we still have the 1918 Spanish flu. There was no clear contingency plan. And now the Ministry of Education, actually, one of my friends who works there, they immediately began working on, what would happen if this was, to become something that was going to last a year or two, or, we all did not know how long this was going to last. And unfortunately, it lasted a lot longer than it should. So what measures were taking? The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Health, along with the Ministry of Education and the National Crisis and Disaster Control Center, all worked together. They required all employees to undergo screening before entering the workplace. We have what is called an app that actually tracks. So we have an app that tracks everybody. That tracks those who have, vaccinated or not. In general, it's just one of those things where it was an essential, and now we do not enter any place, whether it's a school or a shopping mall or medical clinics. We don't enter any kind of institution or business without showing them this app, and to make sure that they have it on green, which means you're safe and you don't have COVID and you haven't tested for COVID, or you haven't been around somebody who's had COVID. Anyone who appears to show symptoms are immediately referred for medical examination. One of my friends, for example, she didn't have any symptoms, but she had been around somebody in her household who had symptoms, and they immediately told her, go ahead and work from home these next 2 weeks until everything is clear. They were tracing all contacts of infected people with or without symptoms, and provide safe quarantine facilities to prevent further transmission. This was when I was talking about the hotels and the furnished apartments and whatnot. They put forth backup plans for the support in case of emergency. So I think it seemed, from my point of view, it seemed like it was a mess, but to be honest, I think they had it all under control. They were doing very, very well. I just think that this whole pandemic really was just too much. So the solutions, besides schools and universities immediately provided with any resources that they needed, they developed protocols for online learning and for returning to work, strengthening, expanding the learning ecosystem, including other educational stakeholders such as parents. Teacher professional workshops, webinars, they were provided at all levels for K through 12 and higher education. We also have a very large number of private schools and international schools. They were also available to them as well. Students of lower socioeconomic statuses were provided with the resources necessary. Wi-Fi connections as well. Some people did not have Wi-Fi connections. And last year, due to this sudden rush, the results from the first semester were actually duplicated for the second semester. So there was really no, final examinations and whatnot. They just decide, hey, just take the same results. This is a pandemic. We're not going to stress the students out anymore. And it wasn't bad. It was actually kind of a relief for a lot of parents. And we're at time check 3, a little early, but.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alangary. And this is the fasting time, and I know that you need to drink or have something.
Oh, I drank. Got my water.
Time, for your fasting, and then I will move forward. If you could just go to the next slide, we're gonna have a breakout rooms. Thank you. So at this point, we're going to run some breakout rooms. I've assigned 5 rooms. So we have rooms with not odd numbers and we have rooms with even numbers. So the even numbers will answer the second question. Odd numbers gonna go and answer the first question. So I'm talking about your room number. If you don't have access to your computer and you are in the classroom watching us, you can scan this QR, which takes you to the Jamboard activity. I'm going to share the link in the chat box for the students who are attending this webinar from their cell phone. First of all, none of your interaction and conversation when you are in the small room, breakout rooms will be recorded or shared on the YouTube. So feel free to unmute yourself or share your screen if you wish so, and even have your video started. Then after 5 minutes having the discussion, you're supposed to use the stickers in the Jamboard and share your ideas. And then you will join to the main room again and share what you found there. So here is the link to the Jamboard. You're more than welcome to start clicking on that and answer the question. Questions also are shared on Jamboard. So
Educational system. Everyone's back?
yes. Hello, everyone, and you're welcome to the main room again. We can see your interaction through the Jamboard, and Dr. Alangary is going to provide us more insights about what you've shared. And meanwhile, you're more than welcome to start sharing your thoughts if you want to. So you need to unmute yourself and then share if you wish so. Okay, Dr. Alangary, so go ahead, please.
All right, so as a future teacher, I think some solutions to K through 12 system would be streamlining curriculum so we're not all teaching different material. Yes, I completely agree with that. Absolutely. I think one of the differences between, I went through the US K through 12 educational system, but I taught here. I think one of the differences is that in the US, it depends on per district and state, et cetera. But here in Saudi Arabia, everybody, all K through 12 has the same curriculum when it comes to the basic core subjects. Private schools will have extra subjects and extra curriculum. It's up to them. But in general, I think this is a great idea. It would be a lot better if there was some streamlining of the curriculum. But again, I think it's up to different districts and different states. As a future teacher, what I believe is encouraging is that now we are more prepared to handle difficult situations, absolutely, and more willing to adapt to change. The pandemic showed us that we can overcome obstacles that come our way. It does pose some challenges as well, such as kids being motivated to do work at home, the same that they are when they are at attendance. I'm not sure if that was the end of it, if it's the same one or not. Yes, we are more prepared. We do, you know, I mean, this forced us to prepare. I think there were some, you know, blessings in disguise, silver linings, whatever you may call it, in that it helped us, you know, really pushed us towards making sure we are completely prepared for online learning and for any, I don't want to say future pandemics. I do not want to put that out there in the universe, for any emergencies. Let's just call it emergencies. I hope nobody ever has to deal with an emergency, because I cannot even imagine being in some parts of the world where they don't have the resources to continue with education during a pandemic. COVID creates an atmosphere for people to problem solve and try different things when something doesn't work. Absolutely, absolutely. We have tried to figure things out on our own and in conjunction with other people from around the world. Learning from other people's experiences has helped a lot. Students can tune into classes virtually when they can't be in school. This is also great. I think right here in Saudi Arabia, they're actually thinking of, so we get sandstorms, and when we get sandstorms, because of people who have asthma, schools usually close. And when we get heavy rain as well, schools will close. I'm just like, well, we used to have snowstorms in Indiana. We did okay. But no, I think right now the plan is, if we are to have anything of the sort, that we will switch online if and when needed. So that's an excellent point. In general, COVID is creating a challenge in everything, including outside the classroom, which can affect the classroom and learning. Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think that it has increased the feelings of isolation for a lot of people. A lot of mental health issues creeping up a little bit, with a little bit of anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. Even though it's a little bit more of a taboo to discuss mental health here, it is now a lot more widely discussed. I think that the challenges do make us stronger. I mean, it does sound a little cliche, you know, it doesn't kill you, make you stronger, but it does, because once you go through something, you know, you're more prepared for it the next time around. As a future teacher, considering COVID-19 pandemic, what do you think are the challenges? Oh, sorry, that was a question. Excuse me, I didn't. As a future teacher, I think some solutions could be a more hybrid model in teaching. Absolutely, a more blended hybrid models. Online classes have been such a huge thing that it can be beneficial to keep around the future when the pandemic is controlled. Students that are sick, yes, exactly. Students that are sick and are not able to attend, they won't have the absences. They could just attend online. One of the things that I had wanted to mention was that for us, when it came to online learning, most of the times our cameras were off. My kids' school was an exception. They go to a private school, which is an international school, so they had their cameras on. But in general, us faculty, we didn't have our cameras on. I mean, we would sit in our pajamas and we'd give our classes, and it was so enjoyable. But at the same time, honestly, I would much rather see my students' faces and, you know, be able to motivation engagement was something that was widely discussed here. And we had a few workshops and webinars on how to motivate and engage your students online. These are all amazing. I mean, I think your students are on the right track and are really, you know, out there thinking of what they're going to do when they're out in the field.
So it is the second question for the even numbers compared to the KSA context. How is the response to the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States educational context?
So they were prepared for the pandemic. Students received textbooks for free, changed the time of school days to allow parents to observe how the students are learning. Absolutely. I think that was one of the things that some of my friends mentioned in the US. I have a lot of friends in the US that, you know, were panicking because they'll be, you know, working online, but at the same time, their kids are going to school online. So you're kind of, and I did that as well. I mean, I had to shift between, you know, my classes and my, you know, son online, which thank goodness my classes were all before 3, so I didn't have to worry too much about it. But, you know, I mean, preparedness is something that I think a lot of people are talking about now, and how to overcome these challenges. What's coming next? What's next for everybody around the world? They were more prepared. Students were given the necessary equipment to continue their education from home. They also made this equipment free for all students and families. Yes. So one of the things is in Saudi Arabia in general, education is free if you go to a public K through 12 or university, public university. And that has always been a blessing. And during a pandemic, it kind of helps as well. So yes, absolutely. In KSA, the educational ideas and plans were more uniform and took into account the needs of the students more so than in the US. I think they did, honestly, they did such a wonderful job here. I was shocked at how fast everything, you know, came about. There were times of confusion. Let's be honest. There were times when all of a sudden things will change overnight and we're just like, oh my God, we're not prepared. We're not ready. What are we going to do? Just like about a few weeks ago when our cases started to rise, we were at 200 something a day. And then they were starting to go up to like 600, 700 a day. That's when the ministry immediately moved up the exams, since it seemed like it was another wave coming, moved up the exams and 2 weeks. And so we were like in a rush to get our exams online and to finish our curriculum, et cetera. So there were some challenges, let's just say. Most schools were prepared for the pandemic. Most schools gave each student a laptop, a tablet. Students didn't have to take final exams at the end of the year. Yes, that was the first year, which was very helpful, to be honest, lessened the anxiety a little bit. This year, no, everyone's taking exams. It's, you know, but all is well. I think in general, teachers and educators in general did the best that they could. under the circumstances. I think they all did, around the world, they all did a wonderful job. They all tried their best. And again, you know, it's all about the student and whether they're learning, and that's what's most important, making sure that our students and all the students are able to really learn, even though we have a pandemic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alangary, to summarize the notes coming from different breakout rooms. And thank you everyone who were participating in this breakout room. So I'm going to ask Dr. Tim Nichols to lead us through the last section of this webinar about the question and answer. Because you are in the class, if you have any question raised in the class, please feel free to share with us.
Has anybody thought of any questions here or any of the folks online? I can maybe start things off while you're thinking. First of all, I enjoyed that so much. That was really, really interesting. And you have such an engaging style, so thanks so much for sharing with us. I was curious about a couple of points in your presentation. Let me ask the first one first. Actually, then I'll answer the different. If the since they quickly moved to televised lessons for students, which I think is terrific, how did those lessons sort of interface with the individual work done by teachers? You might have addressed that, but if so, I kind of missed it.
Well, what happened was we did already have televised lessons that were available online, and teachers were actually going online and teaching their classes. So they were doing synchronous lessons as well as having the availability of these lessons online for those who needed more of an asynchronous type of option where they can go back and watch the videos and whatnot.
All right. And then I also was really intrigued by what you said about that even teachers had their cameras off, because one of our big battles and discussions on both at the whole way, like K through college or university, was what to do about cameras and how to get cameras on and so forth. Did you have any kind of sense of being able to tell if your students were sort of, really with you, if you and they all had their cameras off? How did you know they weren't like watching television or goofing off while you were teaching?
How do we know where they weren't sleeping? I don't know. I have a tendency of actually, once I start my lesson, I put up a whiteboard and I have the students just draw or write anything that they're feeling currently at the time. So sometimes they'll be stressed, sometimes they'll be happy, and I can just kind of gauge if they're with me or not. I also consistently ask throughout my lesson if they've been quiet for too long, are you awake? Are you asleep? Hello? And then they'll kind of pop up, start laughing or whatever. And it's helpful. I think a lot of the issues with the camera is partially culture. Some people are not comfortable turning on their cameras. But the other major issue is more of about equity, because some people maybe do not want to show what's going on in the background. We have big families, so maybe they have brothers and sisters running around screaming their heads off. It's just, sometimes I have to turn off my mic because my kids are screaming their heads off. So it's just, I think it's kind of, it was easier in some ways, but at the same time, I couldn't really tell. There were times, yes, that I was really questioning whether they were still awake or not.
Right, I can see that. All right, so who else has questions? Free
to share your question in the chat box if you have any, please.
Yeah,
I have one question.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, would you say your students are could you see the stress with them? Because I know in my classroom where I observe, a lot of the students are very stressed out from COVID and everything.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had students that actually got COVID during the semester or during one of the semesters, and they would, and I tell them, reach out to me, let me know, it's okay if you cannot attend class, if you're too sick, whatnot. I think the anxiety levels, I think it differed. I don't think, I'm not sure, but in speaking with my friends in the US, I think when it came to higher education, there was a little bit less of an anxiety levels here. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the quick switch to online, I'm not sure. But just reaching out to your students regularly, whether during class or whether having office hours, is really helpful. Sometimes students will not tell you that they are lost or they're not feeling well. So setting up maybe once or twice or however, often you would like during a semester, say, hey, I'm having office hours from this time to this time. I want everybody to sign up for a 10-minute slot. Ask them how they're doing. It helps with the isolation. I think a lot of people are feeling the isolation. I myself am feeling the isolation, like what I wouldn't do to go outside and hug everybody, but apparently I can't do that right now. So, I think just paying attention, making sure, checking in with your students frequently would be a great thing to do. And that was an excellent question, because this is also occurring here as well, and people are asking a lot about that. Excellent question, Jay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who else has questions? Anybody here or anybody online? Feel free to speak or to put it in the chat box.
Don't worry, I won't get offended at anything, so don't worry, okay?
Have classes resumed there?
Yes, we're at
in-person classes?
No. We've had, our midterms were in person, or sorry, last semester's final exams were in person, but that was it. That was pretty much it.
Dr. Alangary, what kind of learning management systems are you using in K-12 educational system? You're using Google Classroom here, CISA Classroom, and other stuff. What is it?
So my kids are using in their classrooms, my son, they're using Canvas. He's a first grader. It has been quite interesting this year trying to teach him. And my other kids are using Google Classrooms. So I think there's just a mix. It just depends on the school, it depends on the level, etc. Universities using Blackboard and Microsoft Teams. And a lot of people have switched to Zoom because sometimes neither works. So just depends.
I might ask another question, if you don't mind, about schools that they are single gender. Because you have been studying in United States, you have a greater idea of the schools here. Could you make a comparison and give us a little bit of idea about that in Saudi Arabia?
So schools are in general, they are segregated with gender, in regards to gender. There's always been this female schools, there's always been the male schools. At the university level, there's more of, in School of Medicine and certain universities and whatnot, there is no segregation of gender. They're all, mixed within. It is more of a cultural thing more than anything. It is not, a lot of people think it's religion. It's not so much the religion part. It is more of a cultural aspect that, depending on cultures, traditions, people are more comfortable, having all girls school or an all boys school. But there are some international schools that have, both in the classroom. And that's just how it's always been. I've never really, paid that much attention to it. But I think, the schools in general, they're doing, just having that. Oh, and elementary, by the way, elementary up until I think 4th grade, they're not segregated. They're all boys and girls together.
Kyle asked an interesting question that I had something like that on mine as well about, student learning across the past year and a half. And I've had a lot of discussions about this. My sister, for example, teaches high school and what to do about really learning deficits across now 3 semesters for our students and how prepared they're going to be for college or to move on to the next thing. And also a lot of inconsistency, so that some students who have highly engaged parents are maybe still doing okay, and other ones have really lost a year and a half of school. What are you finding with that in KSA?
I think in general, within higher education, I think everybody's moving along the same. I don't think there much has changed in regards to that. In K through 12, there are some issues in regards to, for instance, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. They usually have more hands-on with learning how to spell and how to write, and you know, the Arabic language is pretty complex, and so, and I don't always feel qualified to teach my kids myself, but I feel like they have tried as much as possible to keep up. I think progress-wise, in general, everybody has been, you know, on track pretty much. If I were to speak from on my end with my kids, with my first grader, I'm going to say he's behind because he has had to, you know, learning. We just moved to Saudi Arabia about a year and a half ago, and he speaks English way more than he speaks Arabic. He's just learning. And so it has been difficult to try to teach a child a completely different language. But in general, I think they have pretty much stayed consistent. I mean, I'm sure they're a little bit behind on some things, to be honest. Such as writing and etc. It all, like you said, it depends on the parents as well. I, for one, you know, teach, you know, I'm full-time faculty, but I'm also a consultant with the National E-Learning Center. So I'm working here and there and trying to keep up with my kids' education. And at times I get so frustrated, I don't want to do anything. It's just, I'm done, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. So I'm kind of glad that my first grader's done right now. I think it's going to be a nice summer break.
I can imagine. Any other questions from anyone? Oh yeah, did you see, Kyle has another interesting question that I also, I wasn't sure whether to ask a personal question, but since Kyle did.
No.
How you landed in Saudi Arabia, that's quite interesting.
Okay, so I was actually born here and I moved to the States when I was a year and a half. I stayed there almost pretty much up until I finished high school. I only came back to Saudi Arabia for second, third, and fourth grade, just like a little bit of my elementary education. And then I came back here after high school for college, and I worked for about 12 years. And then I went back to the States for my master's and PhD. And once I defended and finished my PhD, I came back here because my family is here, and wherever my mom and dad are, I'm there.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
You know,
So,
you
yeah.
can never get, you know, moms and dads are just everything.
You kind of have a foot in both countries in many ways.
I do actually. I'm just waiting for the airports to open. I'm just so waiting. I need a nice little break, and honestly, I need Target. I know it sounds really, really, really ridiculous, but I need Target. I need, you know, other things. I mean, I have Starbucks here. I have all the stores. I have all the, you know, we have all, you know, McDonald's, everything, but come on, nothing beats Target. I'm just going to be honest. Even my 6-year-old refused to move back because he said there was no Target here. So
wonderful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alangary, Dr. Nichols, and our volunteer co-host, Mr. Kushyar, and all of you wonderful participants, AU students, and colleagues that have joined us from Saudi Arabia. I can't really pronounce, I don't want to pronounce their name, which might be wrong. So, but we can see you in participant, and we are very much grateful for joining us. So Dr. Nichols, hand over to you.
Well, yeah, and thank you so much on behalf of the Education Division. I just think this is a marvelous way to sort of bring the world to Alfred, and I'm just astonished thinking that here you are completely on the other side of the world conversing with us. Like, you know, for someone as old as I am, I feel like I'm in Jetson's land, be able to have, you know, education happening this way. And I think that particularly your sort of, you know, bi perspective on both life in the United States and in KSA made for such an interesting and helpful narrative, and I really enjoyed it. So hope maybe we can meet in person someday. Maybe we'll go to Target together someday.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, and I know that you also are doing it without while fasting, which makes it even more remarkable that it's so engaging and interesting and helpful to us. So
yeah, and I'm usually not good without food, so.
I know I'm cranky without food. You're still in a very good humor. So. So thank you so much. I also want to thank Mina so much for her work in pulling all this together and this really interesting series that's benefited all of us so much. Thanks to all the students who were involved and participated, and we will have another one of these in the fall, and we will be notified about when the next one's coming up. So thank you, and have a great day. And anything else before we go, Mina?
That's it. We will announce the next GEP webinar, which is going to be in September 2021 later. And we will introduce you who will be our next presenters. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you.